to be trick-or-treating. Wait a minute.
We are talking Terrifier 2. Art the Clown is back, once again played by Howard Thornton. This movie is directed and written by Damien Leone, of course, who was responsible for the previous Terrifier movie. Now, the Terrifier film franchise, I guess now, and Art the Clown originally was in a anthology movie called All Hallows Eve. I think there was a short actually before that. So this is kind of been a somewhat established franchise to a certain degree, but it's definitely an underground franchise, really made for more of the hardcore horror fan audience. Now, this movie, at time of recording, has been released theatrically and is doing pretty well. I believe the budget was $250,000 from what I can tell, and it's done over at least the time of recording around kind of like 5-6 million. So it's made a healthy profit, even though it's not, you know, kind of number one at the box office or whatever. Certainly for its budget, it's done very well. This is an independent movie, and it is a hard movie in some ways in regards to the level of violence and gore that you're going to see on screen with this one. We'll touch upon that again. Now, let's talk about Art the Clown, a modern horror icon, definitely. Certainly maybe taking the mantle from killer clowns away from the Joker and Pennywise in these modern times. Art the Clown is a very kind of charismatic character, despite the fact he doesn't actually speak. He's actually a mime, a killer mime. Now, he looked like he had died in the original Terrifier movie, but here he seems to be resurrected and has taken an interest in a particular family, particularly kind of the teenage daughter. Now, this family consists of a single mum, the teenage daughter, and a young son. And they seem to have attracted Art the Clown, who has taken an interest in him, and those around in their orbit as well. And there may well be a connection to this family and Art the Clown that is kind of, you'll discover through the movie. But in the meantime, you'll see a swathe of killing in graphic and gory detail. And not just killing, but torture too. Art the Clown is so sadistic, he doesn't just kill his victims and leave them. Oh no, he wants to kind of play with them as well. He wants to torture them before he actually kind of kills them. So it's a very hard watch if you're not used to certainly the more gory horror films. Now let's talk about what I think works in this movie's favour. Now this isn't going to be for everyone. Let's just cut to the chase here. If you're not a fan of gore films, then you're not going to kind of like this. Even if you kind of like movies like, for example, the modern Halloween films, even though they had a few elements of kind of like some brutal violence, it's nothing compared to the Terrifier films. This movie revels in ultimate maximum gore. The camera does not shy away. It will show you every gory detail. And as I've mentioned, Art the Clown gleefully tortures his victims in some of the most painful ways you can possibly imagine. And you'll see it all on screen in very well done practical effects. Now, they don't skimp on these effects, let me tell you. There is blood everywhere. Gore, skinless bodies, arms getting torn off, guts getting pulled out, hearts being removed. It's all there. But even, as I've said, it's not just the killing, it's the torture as well, which I think adds this extra sadistic element, maybe even making this movie a little mean-spirited, I have to say. So it's going to be a matter of taste whether you're going to like it. But if you like those things, then you're not going to be disappointed with this movie, because it really does have it in spades. And in actual fact, there's very few modern horror films that want to go that far, because they don't want to kind of age themselves out of the market. Even lower budget kind of indie films, maybe through budgetary reasons, don't want to do it. But this one really does hit the spot. And as I've mentioned, I do think Art the Clown is a very kind of effective kind of antagonist. And the fact that he doesn't speak, it's not like he's has too much personality, so to speak, but the way the actor, you know, kind of portrays his personality purely in kind of his physical acting. Howard Thornton, I think, does an excellent job here of conveying this kind of playful menace that you would have seen. I mean, I guess it kind of would remind you of maybe Joker and the Pennywise to a degree, but maybe more hardcore than those. But I thought, oh, yeah, you know, he looks terrifying, hence Terrifier. and you know, he exudes this kind of menace, which I think is great. But I have to say as well, this movie also has some strong other characters outside of Art the Clown. Now, I'm a huge fan of movies that can make you buy into a character. That, to me, if you've got good characters, you're halfway there. You know, you're halfway there. You know, we have our group of protagonists, this family, primarily the mother, the teenage daughter. You know, even though some of the teenagers here are played by 30-year-olds and clearly look it, but that's another story. And we have this young boy as well, this kind of family. I really like them. I thought they all did. I mean, the young boy's a little bit on the weaker side, but he's a kid, so I'm kind of a little bit forgiving in that. But the mother, to me, was fantastic. I actually thought the portrayal of the matriarch of this family, the mother, was so good. I mean, I thought the actress did such a good job of making a believable character that's hard on her kids, but does seem to have this. You know, she's working all the time, she's constantly on the phone to her job, but she's trying to do the best for her. I thought she did an excellent job. She's well written and realistic and very well played. But our main character as well, I think, is interesting. They've given her this kind of cosplay thing that she's really into, which I think gives her a kind of a bit more of a unique flavour, and she's kind of wearing this kind of cosplay costume through the majority of the film, which is visually striking, and it kind of gives her some depth as to, you know, we kind of learn a little bit about her personality, and it's not typical that you would have seen in lots of other kind of like horror films. She seems to be, you know, having interested in these particular hobbies, and seems a little bit kind of like alternative without kind of being the typical kind of like mopey emo that you get in some of these, where you want to have a, you know, an alternative character. So I think the actual character work here is really good. Even some of the smaller characters, for example, there's a guy who works in this shop, like a Halloween shop. Doesn't have a huge amount of screen time, but just the way he's written, the way he's played, his interaction with kind of Art the Clown, it just seemed realistic. It just seemed like this is what a guy who's working in a shop and sees this guy in a clown costume turn out would be like. I just think it was really well done. So we've got an interesting kind of antagonist. We've got great kind of practical effects. We've got some good performances and well-written characters. The story itself, I have some issues with. We're going to talk about it, but it's an okay kind of like A to B storyline in regard to a slasher when you're looking at its basic fashion. There is some issues with it, which I'll come on to. On the technical level, I think it's pretty solid. I think the soundtrack is good, really emphasises it. And the movie does have, although it's more of a gore film, less of a kind of a spooky film, there is some moments that I do feel it kind of builds up a good kind of creepy atmosphere, where you know Art the Clown is kind of out there kind of somewhere, and he's going to pop up, and it's building the anticipation and things like this. All pretty good. And, you know, again, the practical makeup on him, and he kind of has a sidekick to a certain degree, looks kind of menacing. Yeah, that's all good. If you're a horror fan, if you're a slasher fan, you're going to love this movie, regardless of any criticism I'm going to come on to in a minute. So I think it pretty much succeeds in being a good film for slasher fans. Where does it maybe not work quite as well for me? For me, the main issues here are the script and the editing. Editing first. This movie is simply too long. Now, it's 2 hours 20 minutes or so. I mean, 10 minutes of those are credits, but it does have an extended scene within the credits. So you could argue maybe 2 hours 15 minutes. It didn't need to be that long. The story isn't that complex. The story is actually convoluted. I'll talk to it in a minute, but it didn't need to be quite as long as this. There are scenes here that I felt were too long, somewhat kind of, I think kind of like, for example, we have a musical number towards the beginning of the movie. It didn't need to be a whole musical number. It could have just been 10, 15 seconds. But there are sequences here that I felt could have been trimmed down to make this a punchy film. I'm not saying it needed to be necessarily 90 minutes, but I think it could have been, you know, an hour and 3/4. I didn't think it needed to be 2 hours 20 minutes. It kind of felt like a little long to me at times, and it was a little long. But that isn't the main issue for me. The main issue for me with this film is the narrative isn't as strong. Now, I did have some problems with the original narrative of Terrifier. So what I'm going to say here is actually somewhat of a kind of a repeat what I said in my original Terrifier video, but I think it's more so in this film. To me, there were some ideas introduced, some narrative elements here that were either not properly explained, didn't make sense, were convoluted, or kind of frankly, just you don't know really what you're watching. Now, some of this. I'm going to avoid spoilers, but some of these decisions were because we were seeing either visions or dreams, and I don't think the movie is. I mean, deliberately so, perhaps, but it's not making it clear what's a dream and what isn't. So sometimes you're watching and thinking, I don't know if this is a dream or if this person is actually kind of seeing this. And there are times where there's the Art the Clown has a kind of, let me call it, sidekick to a certain degree, and that anything involving this sidekick character was convoluted and confusing. It didn't really make a lot of sense to me. It's like, is this character actually there, or isn't it? Or is it a ghost? If it is, why? We need a bit more context about it. Anything involving this little minion of Art the Clown, I felt was quite poorly handled. Visually speaking, looks cool. No problems with the kind of the aesthetics of it. Just the story elements here of it. But there are other elements as well in regards to. I mean, what exactly is Art the Clown? It's kind of like not exactly clear still. Even whilst watching this one, it's like, yeah, he's clearly sort of supernatural, but kind of what and the circumstance. In the first Terrifier movie, at least until the end, he seemed just like a guy. Although in All Hallows Eve, he clearly was more supernatural. So it's a little bit unclear about what's kind of the rules that apply to Art the Clown. And then maybe this was on purpose, but it kind of makes it so like you could just, the script can do whatever it wants. Because it doesn't kind of contain itself into any type of real structure or rule. It just does what the script wants to do. And sometimes Art the Clown will be more like he's human. For example, we see him naked at one point, washing his clothes. But other times he'll seem, especially if you look at the end credit scene, he's seen certainly more demonic and stuff like that. But that I can kind of get away with. But the kind of this sidekick character, this minion that kind of Art the Clown has, to me, there's certain decisions here that didn't make sense to me. There's certain actions that Art the Clown does that didn't make sense to me. For example, he kidnapped someone, and we learn through exposition that he's done that to try and lure someone, but that was kind of irrespective because they kind of lured this person simply by doing like a voice impression on the phone, which didn't even require the kidnapped person. So again, some things here didn't really quite make sense to me in regards to a narrative flow or anything like that. The whole backstory that involves the family and the connection to Art the Clown, I think, was muddy, and I have to say at the end ended up being a little bit silly. So for me, some story elements here I felt were just not particularly kind of well thought through. And again, I had similar issues with the original Art the Clown. Now, that might not matter to some. It's just a kind of a cool looking killer chopping up people in gory kind of fashion, and that's all people are going to care about, at least some people. But to me, I think it's let down a little bit by some kind of sloppy storytelling. That being said, if you can kind of look past that, and if you're looking on a basic level, I mean, the elements that I've discussed are more kind of side elements to the kind of the main plot. You can kind of ignore them to a certain degree, but they're kind of niggling. But I think the basic plot is serviceable. But everything else, the Art the Clown himself, the characters around him, the practical effects, the technical side of it, all excellent. So I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. It's a solidly made film. I wish we would have maybe another writer involved, if there's a third one here. That's the only thing I would say. It needed a little bit more of a kind of a shorthand in regards to the writing, in my opinion, at least. 7 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.